You know what it is? My computer is just not functioning at any kind of efficiency today. I'm so sorry about this. Okay, so I'm going to introduce you to my two lovely guests. Like I said, so Hannah Ludwig is a mezzo-soprano. She's been a soloist with Baltimore Symphony Orchestra, Columbus Symphony, Colorado Symphony, the Flint Symphony Orchestra. She's been featured by opera companies such as Opera Philadelphia, Teatro Nuovo, Annapolis Opera, the Dallas Opera, and Opera Louisiana. Is it Louisiane or Louisiana?
Louisiane.
Future engagements include returns to Teatro Nuovo and the Columbus Symphony, as well as debuts with Portland Opera and the Bochumer Symphoniker. A graduate of the Academy of Vocal Arts. And Dr. Alexandra Stratyner is a Manhattan-based psychologist who provides tailored individual, couples, family, and group therapy and assessment services alongside her father, Dr. Harris Stratyner at Stratyner Associates. Together, the two are recognized for their individualized, compassionate, and strength-based approach to helping individuals achieve psychological well-being, which I completely believe based on the interviews I've heard so far that Dr. Alex has done in the Facebook group with Hannah. Dr. Stratyner received her PhD in counseling psychology from Seton Hall University, and she did an internship in clinical psychology at Mount Sinai St. Luke's and Mount Sinai West hospitals in New York. She's worked with individuals in a diverse range of settings, including internationally in Trinidad and Tobago, where, by the way, there's an amazing world of percussion and drumming, as I'm sure you know. In addition to her clinical and teaching roles, Dr. Stratyner has authored multiple studies and has served as a research assistant at Weill Cornell Medical Center, Medical College. She's presented her research at multiple conferences, including the American Psychological Association. Was recently published in the peer-reviewed Journal of Psychiatric Practice on the topic of complex PTSD. She's been on TV shows like WNBC's News 4 New York and ABC's Good Morning America. And she has been an invited speaker at the New York State Senate hearings. Senate hearings. Oh yes, I was. You know, lately we hear about New York State Senate hearings and associated with funny characters, right, who have to go and testify before the Senate. So I was like, wait a minute, Senate hearings. Anyway, and then of course there's so many more things. I'm just trying to abbreviate this a little bit, but for our purposes today, one of the best things that she has done and that she and Alex have done together is form this Facebook group that they have called Freelance Performers in Mental Health. So with all that being said, and now that we have a lovely introduction of our wonderful guests, I'd love to start speaking. Now, I'm going to give you the floor. If you would each like to maybe give me your experiences, share your experiences with the community about how you formed, like what brought this about, you know, obviously the pandemic, but at what point was it that you both decided we need to do something like form a support group? You know, I mean, was this your idea, Dr. Alex? Was this your idea, Hannah? Was it sort of mutual? Please.
Hannah, I'll let you take that one.
So Alex and I have known each other for about 6 years, because that's how long I've been dating my boyfriend. And Alex and him go very, very far back. And so she and I have become friends. And when the pandemic really took a hold in this country and all of a sudden gigs started being canceled, it was actually Alex that reached out to me and was like, hey, I'm really curious if there is any kind of like resources or support groups for performers right now, because there's a lot going on. And I remember the phone call and I said, Alex, no one is thinking about their mental health. Everyone's thinking about how they're going to pay rent next month, because it was still very unclear and everybody was losing money and it was really upsetting and we didn't know what was going on. And so the original goal of the group was actually going to be like a one-time as a Facebook thing. And so we were just going to, have a group and maybe provide some resources and like how to find a therapist and things like that. And then it turned into a network, basically, us doing Friday discussions every week, having our monthly support group, having a variety of different guests on, performers, but also mental health professionals in other fields. We've had nutritionists on, estheticians on, we've had historians, philosophers, and talking about different types of fields that all connect within mental health, and then specifically having these episodes geared toward freelance performers, which is a very specific group, and a group that we both felt was highly impacted during this time because we all lost our work and we didn't know what we were going to do. And Alex always says that I am Roz to her Fraser Crane, if anyone gets that reference. Usually she operates as host, and then I act as resident performer / producer / monitor to the group, make sure everything goes up in the comments. And then I am also the editor of our resource guide, which is available as a Google Drive folder. It has resources from all of our guests, as well as helplines, the Psychology Today links to finding a therapist, finding a support group, all kinds of really wonderful resources that we've made available to our group.
Fabulous. And we will be posting that resource list after this chat is over in the comments to this video. Yeah, it's just a great thing. And I just love this, the synergy, because of course, Alex, you're not a professional in the performing world, but obviously you have a great appreciation for it and you have close friends who are in it, which is so, I said for a long time, as a professional musician myself, growing up hearing about people always complaining about other people, musicians in the freelance world, or whether you have a steady orchestral job or whatever we have as a musician, but especially freelancers who are unfortunately often living month to month. And I think that this pandemic has made it clear that that business model is not a good one. We see people with real jobs, right? We see people in the financial sector or the medical sector or whatever sector that's not performing arts. And we sort of have a resentment for them for having their steady paycheck or whatever, no offense, Alex, it's not against you. But, so, and we look at them and it's like, I'm so jealous, or I instead of working as a community of performing artists or freelancers saying, we need to fight to get some kind of security. I mean, all the things that we're now discussing, that the conversation is now happening because of the pandemic, should have been happening a long time ago, actually. And so we look at people with security, in their lives, financial security and healthcare and security and all these things. And we're kind of resentful and jealous of them, right? And now we're realizing, well, it's instead of bringing them down and saying, oh, they suck because they have these things, we should have been helping our unions and our fellow musicians, to fight for these things a long time ago. I already forgot I lost my train of thought. So.
Well, I think, if I may, Roxanne, one of the things that I think is really apparent from the range of topics that we've been covering on freelance performers and mental health is the role that all of the different things that you just mentioned, whether it's, employment security, financial security, healthcare security, these are all things that have an impact on mental health. And, I still hope that this will manifest for the performing arts, because it is so clear that as much as everybody in the arts has been struggling, the only thing that's getting any of us through, those of us who are in these supposedly more secure fields, is the arts. this is what's kept people going in this pandemic. And so my hope, and we've talked about this on our page, is that when we're faced with a crisis like a pandemic, and industries are brought to the ground and people are in pain and afraid, I'm always reluctant to talk about silver linings in COVID, because 500,000 people shouldn't have to, and now more, shouldn't have to die for us to be looking at what people need to feel psychologically safe. But maybe if there is a silver lining, I think one of the things we have to look at is when something burns down, can you build back up a version that's better? Can you create an art that, and we've been talking about this with folks like our good friend Tim Bostwick and many of the other people who we've been interviewing and talking to, can you create an art that better serves the people who have really been an emotional lifeline for the world during this time, which, you know, is our artists, our performers. Can you build back up something that better sustains, supports, embraces, and cares for people who we need as a society?
Absolutely. Yeah. And by the way, I remembered my train of thought from before. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I've said this to many people over the course of this last year plus, which is, you know, everyone's listening to music in their offices or their home offices. Everyone's getting through this, like you just said, thanks to the arts, whether it's movies or music or whatever else it is. You know, watching dance performances on
In our household, it's been a lot of Star Trek.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Spock is great. I mean, you know, whatever it is, it's content, right? That it's artistic content most of the time, that we're all in our cars, we listen to the radio, you know, I mean, Spotify and Sirius, and of course there's talk shows and comedy shows, and there's music, and who's making this music, and how come we're not in the conversation? Well, this is what we were asking a year ago. How come we're not in the conversation when it comes to stimulus checks and all this other stuff? It has taken this year to finally get the politicians on board and be like, oh yeah, we need to support these people who are making this content. And thankfully, so grateful that we finally have a leader in the country, at least in the United States, whose motto is build back better. So, you know, what you're talking about, Alex, was building, how can we build it back in a better way that functions for more of us or all of us? So going back to what I said before, the bad business model hopefully won't be so bad going forward. And just to wrap this thought up before I forget it again, you know, what I was trying to say before was, you know, we're freelance musicians or even musicians with steady work who don't make a lot of money. You know, we're looking at people who make six figures or more, and with a certain sense of contempt, perhaps. And when we were never really trying to understand those worlds or those businesses or those business models or those sectors, and why are, you know, well, it's still unfair, but why is the society valuing those things more than they value us? And there might not be a logical reason for that, because I still don't believe with any logical argument that there's any justification to not value the arts at least as much as we value other sectors. But if we are going to look at these other sectors and say, you know, we should be treated the same, you know, as they are, well, we need to know more about them. And now more and more of us are getting into marketing, getting into digital, you know, promotion of ourselves because we've had to. You know, we're getting into you know, funnels and all of that terminology that goes with, you know, converting clients, and you know, a lot of us are learning more about these things, and anyway, just understanding, you know, different worlds. We're just getting outside of our boxes, because so many of us, Hannah, as you know, go into conservatory, you know, studying music for 12, 14 hours a day, and then all we do is eat and sleep and practice and start performing when we can. And that's all we do. That's our little cycle, a little wheel, hamster wheel of life,
Yeah.
right? So anyway, I've been talking a lot. I want to let you talk, but but my point is that if we want those other sectors to respect the arts and value us, we should have already been doing this. Okay, so the pandemic came, it was a great opportunity, unfortunately, but you said something in one of your interviews, Alex, based on mindfulness, that there's a saying, no mud, no lotus. And as a result of unfortunate events, or maybe not so pretty things happening, more beautiful things hopefully will grow. Again, going back from growing back and building back in a better way. So I hope that we can have more of a mutual respect for the rest of the world and the real jobs and the real, real jobs, and that they will absolutely value us more. And again, on a political level, I think Chuck Schumer yesterday just spoke to the New York Musicians Union in a meeting, Local 802. So this is a kind of communication that, we had a direct line to someone in the Senate. I mean, who can then, convey these needs that the musical community has. So this is it's taken all this time, unfortunately, but finally it's happening, and there is hope. So going back to hope and mental health, and please, can you speak to us? And by the way, whoever's just signing in or logging on right now, if you haven't already, please type into the comments where you're from, where you're watching from. We're very happy to have you. Thank you for joining us today. We are with Dr. Alex Stratyner and Hannah Ludwig, who have started an amazing Facebook page and support group early on in the pandemic for freelance performers, which is called Freelance Performers and Mental Health. So let's talk about physical fitness and what it does to our brains. Now that we're over a year into this pandemic, and there's light at the end of the tunnel, a little bit of light anyway, thankfully. During this year, where so many people have been depressed and just anxious in so many ways, and obviously worried and broke and, just freaking out, a lot of us, many musicians have turned to physical fitness. Even those of us who were practicing some level of physical fitness, it's like many of us got obsessed with it. I know I did. And I know a lot of people that did. And part of that is, of course, that we finally had time to think about our bodies and think about our self-help and wellness practices. But Dr. Alex, can you please explain to us what's going on in our brains? What is it about physical fitness? There are probably going to be things we all know, but is there anything further besides, well, speak to us about endorphins and all those good feeling hormones.
Sure. So, when you think about exercise, and I'm not talking about exercise in a, it's worth providing the disclaimer. I'm not talking about exercise in a compulsive sense or in an obsessive sense. So if you are someone who finds yourself, either if you have a history of eating disorder or compulsive exercise or body dysmorphia or body image issues, if you find yourself utilizing exercise in a way that seems unhealthy, you're losing weight in an unhealthy manner, or certainly if you're, misusing substances intended to help you lose weight or build muscle, that's something you want to talk with a healthcare professional about. So when we talk about fitness, I think it's always worth saying what we're talking about is healthy fitness, because we live in a society that can also really normalize unhealthy fitness. So healthy fitness, and that can look like lots of different things for different people, but actually from a mental health standpoint, really what we're talking about is half an hour, 3 to 5 times a week of some kind of physical activity that gets your heart rate up enough. What the research tells us is probably enough that you want to wash your hair afterwards. In other words, you kind of, you're sweating a little bit. That has mental health benefits, really, well substantiated mental health benefits. And when we're talking about mental health benefits from that kind, exercise, cardiovascular activity, or any kind of physical activity, um, and this could include functional physical activities like gardening. Again, if that gets you breaking out in a sweat,
Yeah.
that works. Um, even cleaning can be, you get vacuuming. I mean, there's some physical activity involved there. Um, Even just half an hour of that 3 to 5 times a week has benefits both on a neurological level, which gets to kind of, Roxanne, what you were talking about, the sort of neurotransmitter response, and I'll get into that in a moment, but also on a psychological and emotional level, sort of separate from the neurology of this. Not to get too technical, but to tell you a little bit about the neurological piece. Your brain, everybody has heard about these things, from whether it's Prozac commercials back in the day, or your brain has what are known as neurotransmitters. Actually, your whole body has neurotransmitters, and they serve different functions. But one of the functions that certain neurotransmitters in the brain has is things like serotonin and dopamine and endorphins. One of the functions, very broadly speaking, is that they play a role in regulating mood. So when you exercise, um, things like your dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter that's associated with pleasure,
Mm-hmm.
actually increases.
Right.
And we also see that when people do other pleasurable things that maybe aren't quite as healthy, like abuse substances, the reason that people do that is because it increases dopamine.
Right.
So, from a neurological standpoint, one of the roles of fitness and mental health is that it's increasing your dopamine levels. It also, it increases, separate from kind of neurotransmitter role, it increases, as I said, endorphins or adrenaline.
Right.
And these are the chemicals in your body that play a role in your stress response, but they also can play a role in, because if you think about it, if you're in a life-threatening situation, or you perceive yourself to be in a life-threatening situation, and your endorphins go up, um, they're also helping to suppress pain, because you have to stay alive. So this can have pain suppressing effects, and it can also have mood boosting effects. So people talk, for example, about the runner's high, and that is part of that is associated with endorphins being increased in your body, which promotes a sense of well-being. You can get that sense of well-being, not just from misusing substances or engaging in other kinds of potentially unhealthy compulsive behaviors, but also from just moderate cardiovascular activity, which is a much healthier way to get those systems active for yourself. Um, and at the same time, um, any kind of physical activity is improving blood flow to the brain, which is also very healthy for neurological health. um, we're reducing inflammation, which increasingly, the medical literature shows that inflammation not only has impacts on how you feel in your physical body, but can have impacts on brain health, and on psychological well-being. And we're lowering levels of stress hormones like cortisol, which again play a role in inflammation, but also can really play a role in your psychological well-being. And increasingly, and this is an area that we don't have as much knowledge of because it's sort of an emerging area of interest, but we're also discovering that physical activity can play a really beneficial role in activating what is sometimes referred to as your endocannabinoid system. And if you hear a root in that word that sounds like I'm talking about marijuana, because you hear cannabinoids, you're not wrong. Your brain endogenously, in other words, sort of naturally, organically, produces chemicals that mimic some of the effects, but in a healthy way, of cannabis use. And so physical fitness also actually activates your endocannabinoid system. And again, that can help with all the, pain relief, inflammation, mood regulation. So all of this has benefits for brain health in a physical organ sense, right? The like actual anatomy and function of this thing under my skull. But it also has psychological and emotional benefits in turn because of that connection between, structure and the function of the brain.
Yeah. No, please go. Did you want to say something else?
I was just going to say, I realize I'm kind of getting, I'm on my nerd soapbox, but so
Please.
the other part of this is that from a psychological and emotional standpoint, and this is the part that's less about chemicals, but of course everything is interrelated. I think that's kind of the beauty of psychology, is there's a lot of complexity to it, and there are multiple explanations for everything. But just from the standpoint of the kind of psychological and emotional piece, exercise, if you make it a part of your routine, it feels good to have a routine. It feels good to do something that is good for you. This improves self-esteem and self-efficacy. It gives you a sense of purpose and meaning. It might help you, gain confidence. All these things psychologically are also really beneficial, especially in a moment where, and knock on wood, with vaccination rates increasing, hopefully we're at the tail end of this, but we've been living for a year in isolation. Right. For many of us without a great sense of purpose, and also with a great deal of anxiety, and having something that gives you a reason to get up in the morning, that's really important. So there's so many benefits to being active in a healthy way, and not in a judgmental, hypercritical, or compulsive way, but in I'm doing this because I want to take care of myself sort of way.
Right. No, thank you for all of that. Just to comment on two of those points. First of all, I don't think I knew that endorphins were also served as a pain suppressant. I thought that was very interesting. Thank you. And yeah, the whole conversation about dopamine, which is kind of one of the purposes, I guess, of the fit musician, is to help musicians gain dopamine, first of all, at a time where we're not achieving that through performing, because part of the reason we love performing is that it gets us on this sort of feeling of high, right? Which is why so many of us, excuse me, so many of us after we perform live, we love to go out with our friends and wind down, and yes, sometimes there might be some substance, I don't want to say that we're substance abusers, most of us, probably not. But, we're going to probably go out and maybe have a glass or two of wine, and which is fine. Some people will do, some other things, there might be drugs involved, there might be other kinds of alcohol or increased amounts. And again, the purpose of the fit musician is not to lecture people and tell them what to do, but one of the purposes of this group is to try and get people to maybe substitute the way they get their dopamine, with maybe healthier options, which long-term might be a better idea. So, but again, if you do have a glass or two of wine, that's actually very, very healthy, especially red wine. And as someone who's lived in Spain for a long time, I can absolutely tell you that you should have some wine in your life. But no, thank you, Alex, for that. That's extremely important, because, it's just so, what's amazing to me is that I personally have always been into physical fitness, probably to some degree for superficial reasons. Like I want to lose weight, I want to look better on the outside. When I was younger, I never thought about feeling better per se. Just like I want to look better. And Hannah, you can speak to this because I think you told me you're a runner, right? So what is it about running that makes you feel good on the inside, then has those effects those perhaps more superficial effects on the outside.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been big into exercise. I did sports when I was in school, and it's just one of those things that it's like, if I don't exercise, I feel kind of out of balance. And I only started running actually because of another musician in the opera community, Lizette Oropeza, who's right now like the biggest soprano in the world. She is a huge proponent of running for fitness, running for overall health. She's done multiple marathons. She always posts on her Instagram, like, I ran 5 miles at 5 a.m. before rehearsal. And I was like, good Lord. But I think that having, especially for singers, having some sort of aerobic activity is very, very healthy, because our bodies are our instrument. And so we just need to take care of that. But during the pandemic, I want to kind of hop on what Alex said about how routine is so important, because I think in a way, like we were talking about how like you get on that hamster wheel and like, this is your day, and you like practice and you do all these things. And then when the pandemic started, and all of a sudden, like my sleep schedule got messed up, and my whole routine got messed up. I still was able to practice, which I think is really weird, because I know a lot of people couldn't, but for me, it was like, must practice, must do this thing, or else I can't. And then with exercise, it was more of, well, what's the point? We're stuck inside. Like, I don't want to exercise. But what was really great is that my boyfriend is also a professional musician. He's a professional oboist. And we kind of just went at it and being like, okay, we have to exercise. We can't just be stuck in our apartment. Like, we have to keep ourselves healthy. And so we transformed our office partly into our home gym. And we basically made sure with each other that we would exercise together in our apartment. We got a subscription to Beachbody, which is a online like video program. And we work out together as a couple 6 days a week. And we keep each other accountable. And even though we don't want to do it, some days we're just like, oh, the world sucks, and like we've lost all of our work, and like this is horrible. We keep each other accountable. And then we feel better at the end of the day. And I think that that's been really, really helpful to both of us, to keep our health together. But also, it's something to do every day that we can commit to every day, even though everything else may not fall in place. Oh, and I lost Naren. And I just think it's been very, very helpful. And it does establish something that can be consistent.
Right.
So one of the things I think it's important to note, going off of what you're talking about, Hannah, is when it comes to specific kinds of mental health concerns that we have seen increase, regardless of whether you've had COVID, and there are these reports coming out about people who've had COVID having increased reports of anxiety and mood disorders. But if we just talk about the kind of social impact of quarantine as potentially being what we might call like a depressogenic or like anxiety-genic experience. In other words, it could bring this about. Anxiety and depression are what I like to refer to as self-reinforcing mental health concerns. I'll give you the example of depression. Depression, when you're feeling depressed, tells you isolate, stay in bed. It keeps you stagnant, and part of the reason for that, if you will, is because depression begets depression. It sort of stokes its own flames. One of the most effective interventions, this is not to say that if you are a person who is dealing with major depressive disorder, that you do not need the support of a mental health professional. I'm a psychologist, and I'm here to tell you, please talk to a psychologist, talk to a psychiatrist. There are supports out there for you. But one of the things that we often talk about as mental health professionals is what's sometimes called behavioral activation, which is actually a really good research-informed treatment for depression, and it's kind of part of how we treat depression. And basically what it is when your mind is telling you, when that depression voice, not literally but figuratively speaking, is saying to you, just stay in bed, there's no point to this, get up and take a walk, get up. And part of that is the neurological piece of it, but part of it is also just seeing yourself as capable of taking meaningful action, of having routine in your life, of doing something that's good for you, supports the reestablishment of self-efficacy, of hope, of optimism that things could get better.
Right.
So, there are lots of good reasons during a time like this, even if it's just taking a walk, to get up and get yourself moving. Or if it's, doing high intensity interval training videos with your boyfriend in your home gym.
Yeah, because I was thinking about, as I was getting ready for this conversation, I was thinking, and of course in the past I've thought of this dichotomy of something as simple as taking a walk, right? Which for some people, when someone is very depressed, that's already a big achievement, just to be able to get up out of bed, go out and take a walk. If for anyone who doesn't know, I was in a traffic accident, a very severe traffic accident 6.5 years ago in Spain. And, aside of the recovery involved, physical recovery, I couldn't go back to work. And so that affected my dopamine levels. It affected my finances, affected my routine. It affected so many things. And especially as a performer, which Hannah, you'll understand, it's so, my personal COVID happened a little bit before COVID actually happened, in the sense that luckily it didn't involve illness, but it did involve depression. It did involve a lack of the usual structure in my own life. And I had to learn these things a few years before COVID, but just getting up and going out for a walk was I was proud of myself if I even did that. There was a while I was just proud of myself if I even did that. But I will say that thanks to walking and thanks to, just having one, I think somebody called it one daily power item per day. If you can just start with one thing to do a day, right? And then you can focus on that one thing. And then, hey, if you do more things, great. But focus on just getting one thing done and reward yourself, be proud of yourself for that one thing. And I think that helps you step by step, baby steps to get back to some kind of structure, some kind of more normal, please.
I like what you're saying about this, like one power action, I think it was.
Daily power
and
item.
the notion of being proud of yourself. Unfortunately, I think, we live in a world, social media certainly hasn't helped this, where one of the things that we see is people who want transformation. And we can get into this all or nothing thinking, where the idea of taking a walk, or the idea of exercising, if it doesn't result in immediate benefit, you can start to feel really demoralized. And one of the things I say to people is, the goal, if you're going to start any kind of behavior change, any at all, try to think about the goal not in terms of, if we're going to talk physical fitness, the pounds lost, the muscle gained, not the long-term goals, but break it down into your subordinate goals. And that goal could just be, today I did the thing that I was going to do, and I'm proud of myself for doing it. Today I took care of my body by taking that walk, and I feel proud of myself that I gave myself permission to do something for me.
Right.
That's much more motivating when it comes to thinking about how to motivate any kind of physical exercise.
I mean, yeah, and on some level, and Hannah, I think you'll understand this. I don't know if you've ever worked with the sports psychologist Don Green, or anyone who, I think Kageyama is the guy who's kind of doing it now. in the online space mostly, but for psychology for performers and how we can achieve our goals, right? And so what do? We have the big deadline, the big audition, the big performance, and then we work backwards, right? What do we need to do this month, this week, over the next 3 days to get to that, to move the needle and get us ready for that bigger goal, right? And so in this sense, there are so many parallels with what you just said, Alex. Okay, I want to feel good. I want to feel good now, but yeah, we need to break it down. We need to just get outside, take a walk for 15 minutes at least. We need to be able to just get out of bed. And sometimes, yeah, we really do get into these deep, dark depressions that impede us from even doing those things. But if we can try and animate ourselves to at least do these little things and then reward ourselves for doing them. That reward idea was very important for me. I know. I would tell myself, I would say out loud, I'm proud of myself. Today I took a walk, when everything else seems to be crumbling. At least I did that, and the benefits of taking a walk, especially if we can get outside during the day when the sun is out, if the sun's not really out today so much, but if it's daytime where our cortisol levels are higher, where we can get maybe some vitamin D, we can our oxytocin levels can go up. I don't know if you can talk about oxytocin and how that affects other processes in the body, but I'm always fascinated with the cortisol higher in the morning and decreasing as we get into the evening, and then the melatonin going up. And for those of us who have irregular sleep schedules, especially due to COVID, we should keep in mind that if you don't know this already, cortisol is higher in the day because this is when we're supposed to be our circadian rhythm. We should be active during the day when daylight is happening, right? And then as the day goes on, our melatonin levels will begin to increase, our cortisol will begin to go down, and that should make us sleepier. But of course, with COVID, that's all been kind of thrown out the window for a lot of people. Going back to this lack of structure and losing sight of what day it is and what time it is. I mean, this happened, I think, to everybody during this time. So I'm just going down this little rabbit hole. But if it comes to, like you were saying before, if our goal is to lose weight, if our goal is to, look better, feel better, if we look better, we usually feel better. It does help our self-esteem. And so in order to do that, we probably need to control our insulin levels. And so, controlling our cortisol and trying to remain on a sort of schedule where our cortisol is higher during the day. For example, I'm a night owl, right? And so I've always been a night owl. It's not just because of this pandemic. And so I get a lot of work done at night, and it's hard for me to go to bed early. Like at 10 p.m. people tell me they're in bed. I'm like, what? How can you do that? Because I'm very productive at night. And so I'm battling my melatonin and cortisol levels all the time, personally. And I've learned how to control it to some degree, but I know, it's funny because we don't think about this all the time. We don't think in terms of hormones. We don't think in terms of, what's actually happening to our bodies. Why am I awake at night? Why am I, what's happening? And I'll just say one more thing. I heard an interesting thing the other day, that why is it not good to eat at night or so close to when we go to bed? And of course, we all think it's because of the extra calories that we're not burning off. Because if we eat at an hour before we go to bed, we're not going out for a run afterwards. We're not going to burn those calories. We're just going to sit around and watch a movie or something, maybe. But actually, I don't know, Alex, if you know if this is true or not, but I heard that we can have sugar crashes while we're sleeping, and that will wake us up and interrupt our sleep. I found that fascinating. I didn't know that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, so we on Freelance Performers in Mental Health had nutritionist Leslie Anderson, registered dietitian, and she spoke a little bit about kind of how your hormone levels naturally fluctuate, and if you eat at a time when sort of your body is sort of naturally moving towards sleep, it can have an impact on metabolic health. And I mean, metabolic health and sleep-wake cycles are definitely connected. But I think, it's interesting talking about sleep, a conversation Hannah and I had very early on in our Facebook group's existence. It really speaks to why we need to talk about career specific considerations when it comes to mental health and also physical health. Because as performers, it's funny, when I was in my training, you read about, different kinds of work schedules that impact sleep hygiene. And you read about people who do shift work or who do overnight work, and how, how that can lead to disordered sleep, and can lead to certain kinds of, different health problems. But to be honest with you, usually what the people these studies are done on are folks who, work in factories and they're on the overnight shift, or they're people who, are air control officers at airports, and so they're, someone has to be working for those flights that are coming in the very late hours or the very early hours. Right. Those studies are never, I haven't seen any of them on performers, but absolutely, I mean, you think about people who do live performance, when you go, unless you're seeing a matinee, most people are going in the evenings, and so your schedules inherently are different. And I think kind of one of the things we talked about early on is like, how does the pandemic change that, and should you be working to normalize your sleep hygiene during this time, or are you just going to end up going back to your usual schedule where you're performing until 10-11 o'clock at night, and are you going to set yourself back? How do you handle all of that? It speaks to the need to tailor the things that we're talking about. That generic mental health advice really probably isn't good mental health advice for anybody, because we live in a modern time where people have very, very different lifestyles depending on what they do.
I was just thinking, it was so funny because I was like, God, I remember the sleep talk that we were doing. And it's so interesting how sleep, mental health, and physical fitness are all like intertwined together. By the way, sorry, I was like looking off in the distance. My boyfriend walked in and I was like, what are you doing? But it is really fascinating because we talk about like this routine of fitness. And I know for a personal fact that if I don't do my, like, whatever it is, a walk or that physical routine, I know I'm not going to sleep well. Like, I just know it. And that's showing up and just doing a little bit of activity really has helped keep my sleep schedule regular. And I always talk with my therapist about like how sleep has been the biggest issue during this whole thing, because it's like your mind's just going, and it's just, you have that like chatter constantly, but it's like, that's your time to either from taking the walk or doing the exercise to remove that chatter. And then it helps you settle in later on in the evening, and it is very important, because it's the times where I haven't gotten a lot of sleep, or the times that I haven't worked out and I'm like, I don't feel like doing this today and I just want to stay in bed. Then the next day I feel like I'm a wreck. And then it's like, well, what was the point of that? Then feel worse about myself. And it's like a never ending, cycle. And so, yeah, it's like, it really will help sleep, and how important sleep is too. Because even if we have these weird schedules of us performing late at night, you can still try to find that rhythm, and you can try to find what works for you in terms of getting the amount of proper sleep. And to help with some of those thoughts,
So yeah, no, thank you for that, because this brings me sort of gradually segue into something I wanted to ask you about. You were just saying that, how taking a walk and just sort of becoming more tranquil and still, right? Essentially, mentally and physically, we're moving our bodies, we're helping our blood circulation and our lung efficacy, all of that, of course. And as a singer, Hannah, I mean, that's incredibly important for you, of course. But I'm fascinated by this dichotomy of, stillness versus intense exercise, and how they both bring us back to this center of clarity and calm, right? Isn't it funny? Some of us really need to like really go hard at the gym or whatever, or our home gyms, do intense, body weight workouts, whether it's a lot of cardio or it's more and more being proven that a lot of cardio is not necessarily the best thing, because that stresses the body as well. But everybody, if you're already a runner, you shouldn't stop being a runner necessarily. But, like whatever it is we need to do, whether it's resistance exercise, hit it hard at the gym with weights or whatever. Or some of us are more into yoga and Tai Chi and just, not easy, but calmer types of exercise. And then of course there's meditation and mindfulness and all the things that help to still our minds. Isn't it funny how these two extremes of really, intense, and then, the opposite, both are good for us, and both are I always find that fascinating.
Yeah, I'm such a huge fan of restorative yoga. I also we do a session together where we just use a foam roller. And for those that, that's like a way of giving yourself a deep tissue massage almost. And that, even though at the time you're like, oh, like my muscles and they're sore and everything like that, you leave feeling way more relaxed. You didn't pay somebody to pound out your back, but it's just a way of like releasing all of that tension and just devoting yourself to that like 5 to 10 minutes that you're just like rolling out on your mat. And so, yeah, and it will distract you. And sometimes even not wanting to do it, for me, it's like, I say to myself, I'm like, I'm just going to roll out my calves, or I'm just going to do 5 minutes. And then if I still don't feel great after 5 minutes, I'm going to stop. And what more of the time ends up happening is I still do the session.
Right. I mean, I was just going to say, and Alex, I don't know if you can speak to this. I think that the end goal is always more stillness and calm, because even if we do hit it hard at the gym, do intense workouts, whether it's, again, high intensity, interval training, sessions of HIIT or a spinning class or whatever we're doing, ultimately, a lot of us do that so that we can be calm afterwards, because we know that will relax us, right? So we know that will bring us down from whatever, if we're wired, if we're anxious about whatever's going on in our own lives. We know that if we go really hard at the gym or, running or whatever our cardio is, cycling, eventually it will calm us down. And a lot of us do exercise for that reason. Yeah, please.
And even really intensive exercise can have a meditative component to it. So, you talk, for example, to runners. And when they talk about their experience of running, it actually often sounds a whole lot like talking to really experienced meditators, because they're able to turn the mind and sort of really focus in and let everything else kind of melt away. In meditation, the way that, in mindfulness, the way that that's done is by taking an observing stance of whatever it is that you are kind of focusing your guided practice on, and then saying, not now, if your mind wanders, and sort of bringing yourself back. I do a lot of work teaching people mindfulness in my therapy practice. In running, in many ways, the process sort of parallels that. So this ability to really, I think a lot of it's about giving yourself permission, to give yourself permission to say here and now, whether it's through exercise at the gym or through taking a run, doing something one-mindedly,
Right.
or sitting on a cushion, and breathing. It really is about grounding yourself, deepening the breath, moving away from that multitasking place, and allowing yourself to come into present moment action, whatever that action can be, is incredibly therapeutic and good for mental health.
Yeah, and also you just said here and now, which is so important for so many people who, especially during this pandemic, parents who have kids at home and have not had a moment to themselves. I know a parent right now who just had to take a leave from her teaching job because she was teaching so much and has two little kids at home and just couldn't deal anymore, and so, and she's a performer, she's a cellist, and she just, of course there's no gigs at the moment, but she's been teaching so much, and she's apparently an excellent teacher, and I'm sure she is. I'm not a cellist, so I don't know personally, but I hear her, and she's just, she's young enough, she's active enough and all that, but I mean, it gets to anyone to not have moments to yourself. I don't have children, and even when I'm being pulled in all directions, whether it's family or friends and all these different commitments, which I also bring on myself because I don't know how to say no to a lot of people. But but just going out for a walk is a great. I've that's become a priority for me, and on days where I cannot do that, I feel that, like you were saying, Hannah, when you can't go for a run or you can't exercise, or our body, and so yeah, this all comes back to all the dopamine and all the hormonal activity and chemical reactions, biochemical reactions that happen in our bodies when we do move and generate circulation and all the things that help us, with longevity and beauty and all the things that are associated with the external, maybe more superficial, online or whatever images, of why we should be exercising. Actually, it's more of an internal, unseen thing, which each of us individually know how it affects us. And one thing I wanted to just touch on, going out, I think, Alex, you said this just now, that something, okay, I can't remember what you said exactly, but something about how, going for a walk, just having this moment to ourselves just helps, what was the word you used? To enter into a state. I wanted to ask you, would you say that we enter into like an alpha state when we're maybe taking a walk, doing some sort of mindless activity where we're moving? I've heard that when we take showers, for example, we enter into an alpha state, which might be, it might explain why we have so many great ideas in the shower, but we're not in a place where we can write them down. There's something about, I don't know if it's the warm running water, I don't know if it's just mindless activity, kind of automated muscular automation, that we're doing, where our brain is functioning on this sort of slower pace, and it's all this muscular memory, just washing our hair, taking a walk, we don't need to think or exert too much energy to do. And I've heard this a couple of times, that we enter into sort of this, alpha state where we're kind of on a very creative level, in our minds. And it's, I don't know, I know taking a shower, I have great ideas, but then when I get out of the shower, I forget them.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, like a shower bath specifically, there are benefits that we've known for a really long time to hydrotherapy, both physically but also mentally. Water can have a real calming effect, and it could be the ocean, but it can just as easily be your shower. Not as familiar with the notion of the alpha state, but I really, to me, what it comes down to in that instance is, in our lives in a contemporary world, we have so many things we could be doing at any one moment, that might be flashing through kind of our thinking, which can be distracting. When you're exercising, when you're in the shower, when you're meditating, what we're working towards is moving away from, having to have 5 different things going on, and we're really just doing one thing. And doing one thing in the world where we constantly feel inundated with 7 million things to do can help kind of focus the mind, ground you. And that probably is a good, that's kind of like fertile ground, if you will, for creative thoughts, um, for just enhanced cognitive ability.
Right.
You know, we know when people are multitasking cognitively, they're usually not working as well. They're not actually as efficient. They're not actually as productive or effective. So,
Absolutely. I know that's true for me, and I'm sure, and I know that it's been, I think it's been scientifically proven that that's just, even though we think we can focus on two or more things at once cognitively, we really can't. I mean, yes, I can focus on the pens that are on my table now, and I acknowledge them, and then I can look this way and focus on some other tchotchkes that are over there. But I'm not looking at both of them and focusing on both of them at once. And maybe that's a really bad example. But yeah, you can't study your science homework and your math homework at the same time. It's just, you're not going to absorb any information really.
right.
So focusing on one thing is absolutely, and yeah, you know, it's funny, we don't think about that. I know I haven't really thought about that, but yeah, when you're taking a shower, that's all you're doing. You're just taking a shower. And so, yes, that's right. Just focusing on one thing, or doing it because there's no other activity you can really do while you're taking a shower. Or in the ocean, you know, you're swimming in the ocean. I mean, maybe you're throwing a ball back and forth with a friend or something, but yeah, I guess the brain needs to focus on one thing at a time.
Yeah. Well, and I think, you know, one of the friends of freelance performers and mental health, Mark Tempesta, who we've spoken with about meditative practice and yoga. You know, one of the things that I think he would talk about it, and a big focus when he was in our early discussions about doing some meditation groups with him, was doing compassion meditation. And so I'm reminded of that right now because you know, there's also something that's very compassionate about, I'm going to that space today, I suppose, about giving yourself, you know, permission, whether it is to exercise, but also just giving your brain permission to not have to focus on 5 different things.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm thinking of one other thing, and we'll wrap up, I think, soon after this, but I just want to make sure that I don't forget to address one thing, and about focusing on one thing. So many performers in this time, you know, so much of our art has gone online. I mean, most of it has really gone online, and, you know, there's all these debates or questions as to, you know, will this remain after the pandemic is over? And I'm sure it will to some degree. Luckily, it won't be exclusively online, which is what we all need to get back to, live performance, and in-person audiences. But a lot of people, you know, for example, I premiered a piece a few months ago. I was very fortunate to be able to do that with a colleague here in New York. And you know, most of us, I mean, I've recorded some audio engineering, I've studied some audio engineering and electronic music production, and I'm familiar with a lot of this gear, but I know that so many people, in our community, you know, we're just learning, you know, what an audio interface was, what an external microphone was. It's not, you know, built into our iPhones or whatever. When we started finding a need to maybe, record things online. You know, maybe we were asked to be part of a virtual orchestra, or maybe we were asked to do a recital or whatever it was. And in order to do that, we had to get, you know, all this technical gear set up and figure out how to do that. As you can see, I still haven't figured out my lighting, but that's another story. So, you know, the anxiety that's that goes in conjunction with, you know, it's anxiety, it's stress, because, you know, you have a deadline, perhaps you're feeling pressured that you need to get this performance online, and you don't know what you're doing, and it's making us anxious, and then we get concerned about things we have never really thought about. For example, as a performer, I don't know how many times I've been on stage in front of a live audience. I mean, hundreds, thousands, perhaps. You know, I haven't counted. And for me as a percussionist, I've always said, you know, I'm on a riser in the back of the orchestra, but I'm behind everyone else. So psychologically, I feel safe. I feel like I'm in a protected bubble when I'm playing in an orchestra. But then I was invited to premiere this duo for marimba and electric guitar, which I'm really happy to do, and I'm glad I did it. But it's like a new space for me. I'm not used to doing. I don't know. It's like a whole. I mean, again, chamber music I've done many times, and I can do a live setting, and it's like you learn to sort of acknowledge the audience, but tune them out at the same time. Right? We learn to sort of create this fourth wall, right? Where there's like there's a separation. But when you're online, first of all, it's like a microphone picks up all sounds, a camera picks up all the good and the bad things that, you know, it sees, right? So then we become more self-conscious. I mean, there's just all these things that are going on, which is why, especially, I feel that healthy physical fitness is so crucial to help us have this sense of self-esteem and gain this, you know, remain confident in what we're doing and help us maintain these dopamine levels of, you know, feeling better about ourselves, because now we were introduced to this whole world of things that we never had to deal with before. We had, if we played in an orchestra or if you sang with an opera company, you know, they had departments that would handle these things. You know, they would have a camera crew, they would have a tech crew. We didn't have to worry about any of this. So now, anyway, my point is all the stresses that were compounded, you know, on top of the situation at hand, which was disease and you know, lack of work, yada yada yada. So anyway, going off.
I mean, and that's why I think the group that we've established is so unique in that, because you're right. Like, here is our working state, and now you're adding, not on top of, we've lost all our work, we're not making a lot of money, we're having to turn to potentially secondary work or training in a new field. You're asking us to perform in a way that we're not used to. You're also asking us to be producers, sound engineers, and we've talked about that. I would recommend, if you join our freelance performers and mental health group, we have a wonderful video that I did with our guest Ingela Onstadt, who's a therapist and also a counselor, and she does coachings. And we did a whole video about online performance anxiety. And she even has started doing webinars about performance anxiety online, which I think is a very unique situation to this, because it is a very specific type of stressor. I think that it is asking musicians a lot, and I can understand the pressure that it's put on, and that, yeah, I think that you are right in that taking our time for ourselves, finding that stillness, finding whatever is going to help us get through those moments where we do feel uncomfortable and we have to sit with those uncomfortable moments, I think is very, very important. I will say that there is, like you said at the beginning, there seems to be a little bit of a light at the tunnel. I can say for myself, I think I made my last performance of singing into my laptop this week, thank God. And the sooner I can get in front of actual people, you know, even though it's hilarious to, like, I feel like normal people of like, oh, how can you stand up in front of, you know, a bunch of people or a concert hall? And it's like, no, that is the most comfortable I will ever feel. Like, I never want to record in my apartment with trucks going by outside ever, ever, ever again. But I feel for all those people. So finding that moment, you know, where you can rest and you can step away, I think that's very crucial. And we are almost out of it. You're almost out of it.
Yeah. No, and just on top of what you were saying, just to add, you know, and Alex, maybe we can end with just a short discussion about human interaction and energy exchange. I mean, from a psychological standpoint, because Hannah, you and I are live performers, and we understand, like, again, we get this dopamine level from especially if people are applauding for us, hopefully, That's all they're doing. You know, people are approving of what we've done. It's a reward in itself, right? It's a sense of reward that we feel, and a sense of accomplishment. And we can be proud of ourselves, and hopefully it won't go to our heads, but at least we can feel proud that we've done something that has pleased other people, and we've given them some art, or we've contributed to the art that they've received, and they feel good and they applaud, and we all know that applause is a release of energy. And so there's this exchange, which is, you know, we watch these talk show hosts, right? And everyone wants to get back, some of them already have, to some level of live performance with a real audience. And I know, just on a different, in a different perspective, or in a different context rather, sorry, I keep getting messages. When I was in the hospital after the traffic accident I was in, the thing that really got me through almost 5 months of hospitalization was people coming to visit me every day. Human interaction, this energy exchange, conversation, you know, meeting of minds, just having people there, some kind of live support network is so important. And I feel for anyone who's in the hospital who doesn't have that, because I can't even imagine what that would be like. I was very, very fortunate to have a constant flux. In fact, I think that they were going to name the room number after me, because people that would come into the hospital were just coming to see me so much. And I was very fortunate for that reason. But going back to as live performers, and Alex, you know, again, psychologically speaking, this exchange of energy, and I don't know what you would call this in psychology, because energy is, I don't know how much you talk about energy in the psychological world. But I don't know, can you speak to any of this about human interaction and what's going on with that? And
Yeah,
then
absolutely. I mean, I have to say, as a psychologist, I've been surprised to discover, and it's different, obviously, than all the things you have to take into account when producing a performance. But I've been surprised to discover the ways in which less is lost than I thought would be when talking to someone over video. But that's not to say that there's nothing lost to that by any means. I mean, when you're in a space with another person, it we know it does feel different. And one of the things, and I think there will probably be some research eventually coming out about this, one of the things that may contribute to that is that there is a little bit of an uncanniness to talking to somebody, because of the fact that there's a slight lag when you're talking to someone over a screen versus sitting in person with someone. Not to mention that there's a lot of nonverbal information that is gleaned when you're sitting in person engaging with someone. And also, you know, you don't have the glare from the screen, which has its own sort of exhausting impact on people. And the etiquette being different. I mean, this in and of itself could be a whole separate discussion, but there certainly are differences. I feel thankful every day, every time Hannah and I do a recording, every time I have a session, that I'm able to see people, knowing that, you know, a few decades ago, none of this would have been possible. We would have been in quarantine, very, very isolated. But it is different. And I think that it is important to recognize that it does feel different. It sits differently. It can be more exhausting. It can feel like you're getting less of the things that you experience from true human connection. And that can take a toll. And part of the way it can take a toll is because you're anticipating that you'll feel better having it, and you realize you don't feel quite as good as you would want it to feel, because it's not quite the same.
Right.
So all of these things can absolutely take a toll. I think it's great that we have them, but I also think that, you know, as people have been discovering, you know, making sure that you're listening to yourself when you're having interactions over video, and sort of checking in and saying, can I, you know, should I spend more time on a video call, or do I need to, you know, step back and be a little bit solitary right now and get away from the screen, because I'm fatigued by it.
Right. Yeah, and obviously also when it comes to physical fitness, I mean, many of us haven't had any other option other than, I mean, especially those of us who don't live with someone, and you don't have your partner there to keep you accountable and you them. You know, having the screen option obviously is this next best thing, but especially as things begin to open up again, I think that if we can exercise, you know, even just take a walk with someone else, we you know, either we want to take a walk alone because that's our only chance to be with ourselves, but you know, if we are feeling isolated or lonely, we should try and find someone, a friend, a neighbor that we can take a walk with, and that will help us feel, you know, less lonely. But it's, again, it's the exchange. There will be an exchange of energies, of human interaction, and that always makes us, well, maybe not always, but hopefully we won't get into an argument with this person, but you know, it will make us feel better in general. So I think unless you have any other thoughts that you would like to add, I think this is a good place to wrap this up. Any other thoughts, any other ideas you'd like to share? We will post the resource list that you've offered in the comments to this video. I don't know if anyone has any questions, anyone who's watching. I'm checking comments right now. Okay, no, people are just saying hi. Hello, everybody. Nora Lee, Kate, Adam, thanks for watching. Let me see. Awesome. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, of course, you can always put these in the comments, and you know, or of course, you can also join Freelance Performers in Mental Health, the Facebook group that that Hannah and Alex started early in the pandemic. Thank you again for doing that. So many people, hundreds of people are in your group, and it's been a great service to the community. I guess I just want to say thank you so much. Please let us know, is there anywhere else that people can find you online? Do you have an Instagram or just, yeah, please let us know where people can connect with you.
We mainly do our promotional stuff on Instagram, but definitely you can follow us at Freelance Performers and Mental Health. That's where most of our activity is on Facebook.
Excellent.
You know, we are always welcoming of new performers, and we hope if this is the first time that you're becoming acquainted with us, that you will come get introduced to our community. We have a really wonderful group of folks who are all going through something simultaneously, and I think that's very powerful.
And Roxanne, thank you so much for having us today. We really appreciate being here. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining me today. It's really been an honor to have you, and wonderful conversation. Thanks so much for engaging with me and with us, and hopefully we will speak again soon.
That's good. Thank you, Roxanne.
Thank you. Thanks, both of you.
Happy Friday, everyone.
Yes, have a wonderful weekend.